Hey friends, it is Jenna, what is up, and welcome back to the Board Game Garden, and welcome to a very exciting preview of kind of this game beside me, which if you've seen the channel before, you know that I've been talking about this game quite a bit recently, and that is Wizards of the Grimoire. It is published by Grimoire Games, who's helping sponsor today's preview, so huge thank you to them. And this is designed by Cole and Joe Banning, which I believe they're brothers. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they are brothers, or maybe cousins. But they have designed Wizards of the Grimoire, and now they have come out with a Kickstarter campaign for a new expansion. And this is called Shifting Sands. It is available on Kickstarter right now, so definitely go and check it out if you're interested. But I say this is a very exciting Kickstarter preview because Wizards of the Grimoire was actually a game that was sent to me quite a while back, and it sat on my shelf of opportunity for quite a long time, and the moment that I got this out and actually played it for the first time, I immediately regret my decision to have it stay on my shelf of opportunity for so long because I just automatically fell in love with this game. And this is a sponsored preview, but I have talked about Wizards of the Grimoire many times in the past, and I have expressed how much I love this game. So I'm excited to be showing you guys the Shifting Sands expansion. I'm not going to be sharing any opinion of obviously the expansion today, but you guys know if you've watched the channel before that I do very much enjoy Wizards of the Grimoire. So we're going to get right into this. I am going to quickly kind of go over how Wizards of the Grimoire plays. I'm going to show you all the components and just an aim of the game overall, and then we'll go into what the expansion adds to the experience of Wizards of the Grimoire, and then that will be the video. So if you guys want to see more about Wizards of the Grimoire and the new expansion, Shifting Sands, then just keep on watching. Give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoy. Also hit the subscribe button down below if you've yet to do so. We'd love to have you here in the garden. I think we just recently hit 23,000, so huge thank you to you guys for being part of the garden. It's been very fun so far, and I love this community so much. But yeah, definitely hit that subscribe button to join the 23,000 amazing people in this community. But yes, without further ado, let's get into this preview of Wizards of the Grimoire with the expansion Shifting Sands, shall we? All right, so getting into the video, we are going to, like I said, go over a quick aim of the game, kind of the theme behind Wizards of the Grimoire, and then we will get into all of the things that the expansion Shifting Sands adds. So basically the story of Wizards of the Grimoire, which I will say right off the bat, it is a two-player game, so it's a head-to-head two-player game. It plays pretty quickly in about 20 to 40 minutes, depending on how quick it takes one opponent to kill the other opponent. And then it also says it is ages 14 to 999. So that is everything for that. But the story behind Wizards of the Grimoire, it is a special sect of wizards sworn to protect the eternal book of spells. The story begins with the sudden death of the Archmage Endor, head of the sect and the keeper of the Grimoire, who is entrusted with the safeguarding of the all-powerful book. And then now, as for tradition, the two prodigies of Endor must then duel to the death, and then that will determine who will take his seat as the protector of the Grimoire. So that is kind of the story behind Wizards of the Grimoire. Basically, you are two prodigies dueling to the death, and whoever wins is now going to be the new keeper of the Grimoire. And basically, each player is going to start at 60, that's going to be the health, and then each player is trying to get their opponent down to 0 first. So whatever opponent manages to get their opponent down to 0 0 first will be the winner and the new keeper of the Grimoire. And players are going to be doing this by drafting spells from the middle pool. They're going to be gathering mana in order to play that mana down to cast those spells and eventually damage their opponent until that opponent gets down to 0. There's a few different types of spells, and then there's also a few different spell activations. So we're gonna go through those when I go into the how to play quickly. But yes, overall, you are simply just drafting those spells, casting those spells, and bringing these different combos into each play. Because there are so many different spells, I think in the base game it comes with 70 spells, and then in the new expansion it comes with 70 additional spells. So you're going to have a ton of different spells and different combinations to create game to game, and in the end just trying to simply kill your opponent before they kill you. So that is a little bit of an aim of the game. I do want to quickly go into the different components that come with the game. So I will say right now, I do have 2 copies here. One was sent that had the prototype of the expansion in it, and one I had from before. So just picture one of these being the expansion. The expansion is in a more of a like burgundy box, so I will show it right here, or maybe I will try to be fancy and like put the box over top of one of these boxes so it looks like it's one of the, or one of them are the expansion. But yes, it is a very early on prototype. I will also mention that some of the cards, or most of the cards in the expansion, there is also, I believe, 70 in the expansion as well, 70 new spells that you can play with. All of them, or most of them, do not have finished art. They kind of just have placeholder art. Most of the ones that do have finished art, I have kind of placed here in the center. I think 8 out of the 70 currently have finished art, and they're still working towards getting all of those 70 art pieces for each of the cards finished. But all of the different spells are completed, and there is some new types of spells being introduced. So we're going to get into all of that, but yes, each of the base game as well as the expansion come with 70 different spells, I believe. The base game comes with mana cards, which the mana cards are just numbered 1 through 4, just cards that you're going to have in your hand. They are going to be playing in order to cast your certain spells, and the number on the mana card is going to determine certain things based off of the spells. So some of them are going to be, you know, deal damage equal to the amount on the mana card that you play in front of it. So sometimes the mana doesn't matter, sometimes it does for particular spells, but yes, with the base game, they have a set of mana cards, and then in the expansion there's also going to be some different, slightly different art mana spells, and then the backs of the cards are going to be burgundy instead of navy blue. In the base game they're navy blue, and then all of the spell cards are always going to be black, so you can shuffle all of the different spell cards together and you won't be able to tell the difference between the ones that came from the base game as well as the expansion. This is fully a card game, so the only components in the game are cards. So you have the spell cards for both the expansion as well as the base game. You have the mana cards, the ones that come in the base game as well as the expansion. And then you also have these right here, which these are the like health trackers, which it is just some cards that you can kind of move around and keep track of your health. Like I said, each player starts at 60 and you're trying to go down to 0. But I will also mention that there is a fantastic Wizards of the Grimoire companion app that I do have on my phone. I will put in some B-roll of it so you guys can see it, but it is just a really nice app that you simply just keep track of your health on there for both you and your opponent. So I always use that. I usually never use the like health tracker cards here, but you can obviously if you don't want to use your phone, but I always choose to use my phone. And then also with the base game, you do get your little help cards here. One side has the opening phase as well as your turn order. Then the other side has the different spell activations as well as the different spell types. So there's just 2 of those, one for each player because it is a 2-player game. But yes, that is everything about the aim of the game and the different components in each of the games. I will also mention that the cards in Wizards of the Grimoire, The base game, obviously the one that I got in prototype, the cards are slightly different, but I'm assuming they're going to be having them in that nice linen finish of the base game that I received, but these are so nice. They are that linen finish. They have that little bit of like texture in them. And I have often thought about sleeving these, but then I have just opted to not sleeve them because the cards are just so nice. They're that like nice like satiny texture. They're like not shiny. They're on almost like a satin matte finish, which I absolutely love. So I'm assuming that that will be the same for the expansion. But yeah, let's get into how Wizards of the Grimoire plays and then what the expansion adds to the game. I also want to point out that my sweater, I thought that this would be like a perfect sweater to wear for this video because this is literally like, it looks like a magic spell is like on the sleeve. If you guys can see, there's like little stars and it kind of is like this swish. And it reminds me of magic, so this is my magic sweater. But anyways, getting into how Wizards of the Grimoire plays. Like I mentioned, you're going to be dueling wizards, trying to get your opponent down to 0 health, and you're going to be drafting spells into your own spell area, and then you're going to be playing mana cards down to each of those spells in order to cast those spells onto your opponent. So basically, you're going to start off the game. Whoever is the first player will draft a spell from the middle. There's always going to be 10 spells in the middle. You can kind of look at them, read the different things, read the different abilities, which that's actually a good time for me to explain the different types of spells as well as the different spell activations. So there are 3 different types of spells. There are the damage spells, there are the regeneration spells, as well as the utility spells. So damage spells are going to be the red. There's always going to be an icon in the top left-hand corner that is the color of that certain spell. So damage spells are going to be primarily or always spells that are going to be dealing damage to your opponent, and that is going to be the red color. You also have the green, which is going to be the regeneration spells, and these are going to be spells that are going to be gaining you additional mana, which mana is very important because all spells are going to require some number of mana. I believe there might be some that require 0, but they're often 1 to, I think I've seen a few that are 5 or like cost 5, but it's usually about 1 to 4 that you are spending on these different spells, and you're going to be discarding those from your hand. So it's always really important to have lots of mana in your hand. So those are the regeneration spells, one with the green color. And then there's also the purple, which is utility. And these are going to be spells that are kind of going to allow you to manipulate the mana that you have played in front of you and just manipulate mana in general. So these are going to be spells that are like pick up 2 mana from 2 of your spells, or pick up mana from all of your spells that cost 3 or more, different things like that. And also sometimes they are spells that are going to kind of change up or manipulate the game's rules. So they're just some different things that kind of change up the game and do some different things than what you are typically used to. So those are the 3 different types of spells. There is the damage, which is red, regeneration, which is green, and utility, which is purple. And then you're going to move on to the different spell activations. So this is going to be kind of the type of spell it is, or like the way that the spell is. So there is either an instant spell, which is going to be an icon with an arrow pointing down. There's going to be a delayed spell, which is going to be an icon with an arrow pointing to the right. And then there's also an ongoing spell, which is going to be one of those like circular arrows spinning around each other, if that makes sense. So there's going to be a different combination of these things. So there could be an instant damage spell, there could be an ongoing regeneration spell, different things like that. And then additionally, there is one other type of spell that is going to be introduced with the expansion, Shifting Sands, so we'll get into that a little bit later. But for the most part, with the base game, you do have those 3 different types of spells and the 3 different spell activations. So with those out of the way, like I was saying, when you start off the game, the first player is going to draft one of the spells from the pool here. So I might draft one of these spells, and then a new spell will get flipped over. The second player would then draft a spell for themselves, so they might draft this one and put that into their player area, and then a new one would get placed out. And then the first player, me, would then draft my second spell. I might decide to draft, let me do this one here. I decide to draft that one, a new spell would then come out. Now, once I was finished with drafting my second card, the second player would actually still draft a card, but this is going to be them moving into a full turn. So once we were finished with this, which was me drafting a card, them drafting a card, and then me drafting a card, that's kind of like the opening phase. So it's just the initial drafting of a few spells so that we each have some. The second player would actually move into a full turn. So this does include drafting a spell, but then they will continue to a few other things to finish off a full turn. We will continue with those full turns back and forth until one player has gone to 0, and then the other player will be the winner. So let's go over what a full turn is. So once I was finished with my second draft, the second player would go into their full turn, where they would start with drafting another spell. So simply they would just look at the different spells they have in front of them and draft one. So let's just say they draft this one right here. That would go into their play area, which I will mention right now that each player can have all the way up to 6 different spells. And once they get to 6 spells, they cannot add any more spells. But if you start a turn with a spell that has no mana on it, you can decide to discard that spell and draft a new one. And that is the only way that you can continue to get new spells after you have those 6 spells, which actually in the Shifting Sands expansion, there is a new type of spell, which we'll get into, that is kind of going to help you cycle through your spells a little bit more. I didn't remember to take another spell out. But yes, you're going to have that maximum of 6 different spells. So you're going to, at the beginning of your turn, draft a spell if you have room for a new spell. Like I mentioned, if you do have a spell that has no mana on it, you can discard that spell to draft a new spell. You'll then get into spell cooldown, which I think I'm going to explain after I explain the next few, but just know that this is the second step and we'll go back to it in a second. But the third thing is that you are going to draft, or not draft, you're going to draw 3 mana cards from the mana deck. So you will have these in your hand. Like I mentioned, the mana is going to come in 4 different numbers, 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are going to matter for some of the spells and not for others. But basically the higher, the better the mana. And also I do believe that there are more of the lower numbers than there are the higher numbers. But you're going to always draw 3 new mana cards at the beginning of your turn. And then you'll move into the casting of your spells. So in this example here, I do have 2 different spells that I can cast. And this is kind of what I wanted to go over before we go over the cooldown, which, like I said, is the second thing that you do on your turn. But each of your spells is going to have a certain amount of cards or a certain amount of mana it takes in order to cast that spell. So this one here, which is Invisible Friend. So Invisible Friend here does have a cost of 2 mana cards, and then Echo here has a cost of 3 mana cards. So I could, on my turn, decide to take 2 of my mana cards, and then I could place those face down. You can kind of do this the way that you prefer. You can kind of shift them so you can like know how many cards are on each of your spells. You could just put them in a simple pile below. You could put it on top. Whatever you want to do to kind of show you how many mana cards are on each of your spells, you can do it the way that you want. But I personally just put them in a pile underneath my spell here, and then that's going to be the mana that I spent on that spell. And Invisible Friend here says reveal 6 mana cards from the mana deck, place the highest powered mana back on the top of the mana deck, and gain the remaining 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I gain 6 mana. Unfortunately, I do have to put one of the highest, which I actually got 2 4s, which is pretty good. So I would just simply have to place that 1 4 back on top of the pile here. I do still have 1 4 in my hand, which is really nice. And then I still have the one that I had remaining from when I picked up my 3 mana cards. So I now have 6 mana cards in my hand, which means I can actually do my second spell here, which is Echo. And the Echo ability here, which I will mention actually while looking at these, there are a few different difficulties of spells, I guess. In the bottom right-hand corner, you're going to have a certain amount of star icons, and that's going to be, I believe, the difficulty of the spell. So the Invisible Friend spell is a 1-star. Spell, which I believe when you are starting off with the game and you want a beginner-friendly game, you can just include the 1-star spells. But as you get better at the game and you want to introduce some more just challenging kind of more difficult spells into your game, you can introduce the 2-star spells as well as the 3-star spells. And then in the base game, there is a small little expansion that also has like a little like scroll icon in the bottom right-hand corner. So that one is a little bit different. So this spell here, which is Echo, is a 3-star spell. So it's a little bit more complicated or a little bit more difficult, but its ability is deal 3 damage. If you cast one of your other instant spells immediately before this one, which Invisible Friend is an instant spell, and it costs 1 or less, which unfortunately Invisible Friend costs 2, so this is not going to apply. But if it costs 1 or less, this spell gains that spell's effect. So if you did another spell before this one that was 1 or less, and it was an instant spell, you would actually be able to do that instant spell's ability again, which is pretty cool. But I still would, I think, just take 3 of my mana cards and put them below Echo, just simply to be able to hit my opponent for 3 damage. So with your turn, once you are finished with playing down your mana cards in order to cast your different spells, you will then move on to the last part of your turn, and that is just simply a basic attack, which means you take one of your mana cards that you have left in your hand. Let's just say I maybe just wanted to hit my opponent for 4. I will maybe do a basic attack of 4. I would discard that 4 mana card, and then I would deal an additional 4 damage to my opponent. So once I was completely finished with my turn, it would then be my opponent's turn, and they would go through a full turn again as well, which would be drafting one of the spells if they had room for one in their 6-card kind of tableau in front of them. They would then go into a cooldown, which I kind of skipped over with my turn, but we'll go into it now, which basically a cooldown just simply means that all of your spells that had mana on it, they would discard 1 off of that card. So you would discard 1 mana and 1 mana. And so that basically just means that the spells that have more of a cost, so a spell that maybe has 4 mana, is going to take more turns in order to clear all that mana off. So it's going to be a longer time between you casting that spell. So the stronger the spell, the longer you're gonna have to kind of rest before you are able to cast that spell. So that is the cooldown step. The opponent would then go into drawing 3 mana cards, doing any kind of casting of spells that they would want to, dealing damage to you, gaining mana cards, manipulating mana, different things like that. And once they were finished with casting all of the spells that they could and wanted to, they would then move into a basic attack where they would simply just discard one of their mana cards, dealing damage based off of the amount on that mana card. It would then be my turn again. We would continue this back and forth until obviously one player got below 0, and the player that did that to the opposing opponent would then be the winner and the new keeper of the Grimoire. All right, so now that I've given you an overview of how Wizards of the Grimoire plays, let's get into all of the new things that the Shifting Sands expansion adds to the game, which I will say right now that Shifting Sands is primarily a more stuff expansion. It adds just more cards to the base game. So if Wizards of the Grimoire, the base game, is just something that you don't like, then adding the expansion is not going to change that. It is just more of what you already have in the base game. But if you do like the sounds of the base game, if you've played the base game before, adding Shifting Sands is just going to give you more replayability. It's going to give you more spells to kind of mix together with the base game, different spells that you can kind of create combos with and different things like that. But additionally, it also adds in, like I said, there's going to be another set of mana cards. So they are going to be completely different art, which I will see if I can add some maybe B-roll or some just pictures of the new art of the mana. I think I remember. Also, if you guys go and see the Kickstarter like campaign page, it does have pictures of the new mana cards, I believe. So that's going to be another new thing with the Shifting Sands expansion, is that you do get an additional deck of mana cards with slightly different art. You will also gain obviously a bunch of new spells. Like I said, the base game comes with 70 different spell cards, and then the expansion, I believe, comes with 70 as well. So you're doubling the amount of different spells that you can kind of mix and match for the game. But additionally, one of the biggest things, there is, I believe, a new keyword. That keyword is destroy a spell, which was never anything that you had in the base game, where basically when it says destroy a spell, that actually means that you can either destroy one of your own spells, so you actually can destroy a spell that has mana on it. You can destroy one of your opponent's spells, or you can decide to destroy one of the spells that is in the pool. So if there is a spell that you don't want your opponent to eventually get, you could destroy that spell from the available drafting pool. And then, like I said, you can destroy one of your own or your opponent's spells. So that's going to be a kind of new keyword that you're going to see in some of the spells in the Shifting Sands expansion. And then one of the biggest things for the Shifting Sands expansion is that there is a new type of spell, which in the B-roll, you guys will see that the little icon in the corner for these new spells says OTU. OTU is just kind of a placeholder for the prototype, which is one-time use. And these are going to be relic spells. So these are going to be one-time use spells. And I think I kind of mentioned this in the overview, but basically these are going to be introduced in the expansion, and they are kind of going to allow you to cycle through spells more in the game. So typically, like I mentioned in the base game of Wizards of the Grimoire, the only way, if you have all 6 of your spells here, the only way for you to be able to get rid of a spell to get a new spell is that you have to start your turn with a spell not having any mana on it, which is a little bit difficult because you do on that prior turn have to think, I want to get rid of this turn on my next, or I want to get rid of this spell on my next turn. So I can't use it this turn because that's going to put a mana on it. So, and this is before it does like the cooldown phase. So you have to be able to have 0 mana on it in order to get rid of it. But if you do have one of these one-time use spells in one of these 6 spots, basically once you do spend those 2 mana or however many mana it is for this spell, it actually gets discarded and it's just a one-time use. And these are going to be slightly stronger abilities in my opinion. This one here is during your opponent's next turn, the power of all mana is decreased by 1. So this is going to be a 1-turn use kind of ongoing ability for your opponent's next turn. So once that was over, you would then discard the mana that you played for it. You would discard the one-time use relic card, and then that would leave an open space for you to get a new spell. So these are going to be introduced, and like I said, these are going to introduce some very interesting plays in the game, I think. And I'm really excited to play more with these relics and kind of play around with them, because it does change up the game more than you think it would, because you are cycling through those spells. Obviously, you don't even have to focus on these relics. You can kind of ignore them and play Wizards of the Grimoire just with all of the new spells and not really focus on these one-time use spells, but I think it's a great way in order for you to kind of change up your play. Sometimes in Wizards of the Grimoire, the base game, you kind of get your set of spells and then that's kind of your engine for the game. Sometimes you switch it up slightly. If one of your spells is not working quite great, you can decide to, you know, start your turn with that spell not having any mana, discarding it and grabbing a new one. But with these one-time use ones, you don't really have to think too much about that, and you can kind of change up your engine a little bit more during the game than you would with the base game. So yes, that is everything for just a little bit of an overview of what the Shifting Sands expansion adds. Like I said, it is really just a more of what you already get in the base game, but if you really enjoy Wizards of the Grimoire, or you've been wanting to try Wizards of the Grimoire, they will have the base game as well as the expansion available. Also, I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but this is a standalone expansion, so you can just play with the expansion spells, and then obviously the expansion comes with the mana, so you can just get the expansion and be able to play Wizards of the Grimoire just with the expansion. But if you want all of those different spells, 70 from the base game, 70 from the expansion, just having lots of different spells to work with, then it would be great to get the base game as well as the expansion. All right, friends, so that is going to be everything for today's preview of Wizards of the Grimoire, the Shifting Sands expansion, as well as the base game. They do have that available on the campaign as well. A huge thank you to Grimoire Games for sponsoring today's video. I appreciate it so, so much. And like I said, this was one that I've been really looking forward to covering. So huge thank you to you guys for hanging out with me today. If you enjoyed, give this video a big thumbs up. Also hit that subscribe button down below if you've yet to do so. We'd love to have you here in the garden. Definitely let me know if Wizards of the Grimoire is something that you are interested in, if it's a game that you heard from me talk about in earlier videos. I would love to know if it's something that you have started getting into as well. I've really enjoyed it so far, and I'm excited to dive more and more into the Shifting Sands expansion. But yes, I love you guys so much. Remember, you are somebody's reason to smile, and I will see you in the next board game video. Bye, friends.